I think we're live. Well, no, we're not. Okay. We're live on YouTube, but not quite Facebook yet. We're waiting for the little bit of notification here. So while that seems to be coming through, I'm just going to make sure the headphones are connected the right way. And we're live. Well, Lunatics, it's an adventure every single day that I'm doing this show. A little bit more solo, and I don't have a little bit more buffer to work with. But we are live now. Facebook has thankfully brought back the share button, which allows me to try to start my watch party while I also talk and type. But we're live. We've got a watch party started. There's probably a couple of viewers here. And it seems like a good opportunity to start the show. So let's go ahead and figure that out as well. An adventure every single day. I love it. Welcome to hotlou Happy Hour. I'm your host, Lou Abramowski, or somewhat majorly known as hotlou. Normally, this is the part where Darth Loaf, Mike Loaf, introduces himself, but he's got a campaign to run, as we announced last week. He is running for the mayor of Jordan, along with actually resuming a more normal work schedule that involves a little bit of travel kind of throughout the state of Minnesota. So I love it. Love it. Thank you, loyal lunatic Josh Kimber, for tuning in for the botched beginning of the show. But I think it went relatively well, other than the I don't know. I don't know if the music actually came through or not, so I don't know if it was worth that, but it kind of went okay. But today I want to just talk about something pretty briefly. I know that last couple of shows I've said that this is going to be a quick show, and then 50 minutes later I'm still talking to myself. And by myself, I do mean the lunatics. However, oh boy, Kimber. Okay, loyal lunatic Josh Kimber and chief fact checker Josh Kimber also just said the Big Ten is canceled. So I saw news that it was probably going to happen, but I didn't see that it was official. As I've basically been staring at a Zoom screen since 9:30 this morning. So I haven't gotten a chance to see that. So fact checker Josh Kimber will tune in again. But it wouldn't surprise me if the entire Franklin household right now is playing taps and ordering more beer and whiskey to drown their sorrows away for the evening. Wow. 12-2 vote. The announcement is tomorrow. Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of shocked that we're still seeing Major League Baseball games and NBA games happening. But I guess I'm not too surprised about the football being canceled here. Yeah, it's going to be a bunch of roller coaster of emotions in so many different ways. So I don't even know if I should bother talking about what I plan on talking about here, but maybe we'll get back into the Big Ten thing. Maybe Mike Loaf will surprise us and join the show. In who knows what kind of emotional state we might get him. But before I kind of dive into one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, I do want to say we are officially going to have a live show on Wednesday. This show is live too, by the way. I hope you could tell by the fact that I'm interacting with the comments here. But on Wednesday, we're going to be live from Nickelodeon Universe at Mall of America. And we'll be talking to their vice president of communications and just generally talking about the process of reopening what has been at times declared the #1 tourist attraction in North America. I don't know what their status is currently, but Mike and I will be at Nickelodeon Universe for about a half hour or so, wearing masks and chatting with them about safety and everything that they're doing, because that's got to be just an enormous challenge. And I know they've had, I can't even imagine the number of challenges that they've had, you know, compared to, like putting together Big Ten football or something like that. But so make sure to mark your calendars, 4 p.m. Central. We'll be talking to them. And if you've got any questions, we'll be happy to share them. But we'll also hopefully share some cool things. I really changed my tune on Mall of America over the last couple of years. I've always liked them. I know that Minnesotans at times can be a little bit contemptuous of and I can't believe I just used that word because I'm about to dive into a much different topic here. But it's really odd that I hear people talk about Mall of America the way that they do, because I just don't think they understand how many cool things there are to do there. And, I get the criticism that, yeah, it's just like, okay, there's 3 Victoria's Secrets and, 5 different Gap stores. It's just like another mall. I don't think that's the case. I think it's a pretty cool event space. And now I just think that the last couple of years has been really, really cool. So I can't wait to talk to them about that. But for today, I was inspired because I was reading a Reddit comment not too long ago, just about and backing up. I had a little bit of an argument with this huge Trump supporter that very quickly devolved, as they often do, into a really odd comment that I heard that I hadn't really deeply considered previously, but it was that the Trump supporter said, in response to somebody basically saying that Trump is just a liar, and I don't know that there's really a ton of people who disagree with that. Even Trump supporters themselves, I think, are very aware that he just makes shit up all the time. And what was interesting to hear this Trump supporters' response was, well, all politicians lie. And, there's truth to that. And particularly, Mike and I have talked about the fact that, yeah, Obama lied all the time about lots of stuff. And you can argue whether or not it was intentional. But, to serve public office, it's virtually impossible to be open, transparent, and radically honest. You are going to have to spin the truth to ensure that your base continues to support you, or to persuade those kind of undecideds that aren't going to dig deep into the facts and are just going to believe that CNN or Fox headline or NPR headline that is plausible but not necessarily accurate or wholly true. And so that thought has just kind of been spinning through my head. And then this first quote that I'm going to read from this Reddit comment is not specifically related to this thought, but I thought one sentiment that I've kind of seen that's pretty interesting over the last, I don't know, couple of months here is specifically, and you know what, I'm going to throw a poll up here. Is Trump the worst lying president ever? That's not a good question. How about, do all POTUSes lie a lot? Yes, no, it varies. So let's see what comes across in this poll here. But so this first quote isn't necessarily totally related to the lying aspect of things, or even why. Well, the whole lying thing really got me to thinking, in that hearing that person talk about the not necessarily wanting to wrap themselves around whether or not Trump is a liar or a really bad liar or anything like that, but that, what does it matter? All politicians lie. And, my immediate response was that, like, if that's true, like, does that mean that you just shouldn't hold people accountable? But I think it started making me think, like, really, what is it? What are the things that make people like Trump? And, you know, I think just generally speaking, haven't given it a ton of deep thought, but I've had some feelings on this, and I think as we all have, and I think sometimes people are just like a little bit too dismissive of why they like Trump. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But I thought this, and I've heard a very similar sentiment around this several times the last couple of years, but this comment was pretty interesting. Um, by Reddit user Butter Puppets. I was reading Fire and Fury a while back. I think this is from the book. I'm going to poorly paraphrase from memory, but there were some Eastern European girlfriends, and someone said something like, "You don't want to go to Atlantic City. It's full of white trash." Somebody else responded, "What's white trash?" And one of the Eastern European girlfriends responded, sorry, I got that a little bit messed up, but yeah, loyal lunatic James Wallen chiming in JFW saying, when was the last time Trump said anything truthful? Yeah, I don't know. And we'll get into that in a second. But to end the anecdote here, somebody asked, "What's white trash?" One of the Eastern European girlfriends asked what white trash is, and Trump replied, apparently to the group, "They're like me, only poor." And whether or not that's an accurate anecdote, who cares? I mean, there sure seems to be some truth to it. And somebody followed up by this, and I saw this clip a long time ago, and I can't really remember the context, but this commenter said, I think it was Howard Stern who said something like, "Go to Mar-a-Lago," and this quote is way off, but the idea, and it goes on to say, "Go to Mar-a-Lago, he would be disgusted by you." And I think that's really fascinating about Trump supporters, is I don't really think that they realize, for many of them, Trump would be disgusted by most Trump supporters, or many Trump supporters, I should say. And that's not to say that I don't, Hillary Clinton, famously called all the Trump supporters a basket of deplorables, and that just activated her opponents. And I think there's probably some truth to a handful of presidents, or every president probably being disgusted by a bunch of their supporters. But man, it's really fascinating to see how fervently there are some Trump supporters supporting him, not realizing that he wouldn't like them back. So that comment was interesting. And then I started kind of digging in a little bit more. And there was kind of like this comment, like underneath it, really got the gears spinning for me. And I'm going to try to fly through this or skim through it a little bit. But apparently this is a German Redditor, but it says, "I think based on what I've gathered from our German history and the recent years with the far right party in Germany, AfD, gaining popularity in the lower class has to do with a mix of different issues and misinterpretations. But first of all, most people would agree that politicians lie, or at least as perceived to be lies. Now someone enters the ring that seems to speak his mind unfiltered, and that's how I think this German person's English is a little rough. As opposed to the scheming tactics and selfishness of other political parties." Now, I was going to read more, but the chopped English might screw things up a little bit. But this confluence of things happening, and I just did it again. So the three things that I kind of identified that seem to really make up, I think, a large portion of the people who like Trump is, it seems like if you're very, very rich, you're going to support him. And not only very, very rich, but getting richer, and you desire more wealth. That seems to be and I think Peter Thiel is at the top of that list. He is a gay venture capitalist billionaire, and he's been out there supporting Trump quite a bit. I don't know if he's still on the supporting Trump train, but he was for a very, very long time. So if you're very wealthy and you want to get more wealthy, it seems like you're going to support Trump. The other thing is if you have this like disdain for politicians, and I'm going to come back to this a little bit, because I think this is really the fine point that seems to be a big portion that doesn't seem quite as obvious. And then the third one is that you just hate liberals, and you want to find a way to own the libs, own the libtards. And voting for Trump might be a good enough reason. Like flying a Trump flag doesn't even mean necessarily that you support Trump, but man, it is exciting to see that angry social justice warrior like getting irritated by the fact that you're flying a Trump flag. I don't think the being rich and wanting to be richer, or the like hating and trying to own the libs are the two things that surprise people. But I started to think a little bit about this like hating politicians thing based on the other comment that I got in the conversation that I had on Facebook. But this notion that hating a politician is enough to vote for Trump makes a lot of sense to me. And it seems to be some sort of product of like what a politician looks like, and holding this worldview that a politician is going to lie to you. A politician is out to deceive you as much as possible. And because they're out to deceive you, everything that they say is deceitful. And there are all of these patterns that are easily recognizable by like every human being. It's what I've already been guilty of a couple times. I've already said the word contemptuous and something else. And on this show, I used the word verisimilitudinous one time, unironically. I've tried to say extrajudiciously way too many times. And I think that, when politicians are using like words that feel like political talking points and seem to be like playing the part of a politician, and as a voter, you see somebody like that and you immediately think to yourself, that's a politician. They're only trying to deceive me. So everything that they're saying is some kind of lie. Therefore, I don't trust them. And then along comes Trump, and he doesn't share any of those patterns that you can recognize. He doesn't use the big words that you would see from a politician. He doesn't speak about like broader philosophies about politics and, socioeconomic principles or problems or things like that. He just comes in and he's just like talking like like somebody loading up a truck of tomatoes in a parking lot. And, that is enough sometimes for them to say, at least this guy is not deceiving me the way a politician would. And by the very nature of appearing so different, it automatically disassociates them from that lying group. So you feel like he's just telling it like it is, and at least you're getting the actual Donald Trump. You're getting the actual candidate that you're voting for. And as a result, we end up seeing people that are just like refusing to accept or hold accountable any of his lies, because they're very comfortable accepting the fact that if it was anybody else in office, they'd be being lied to too. But now they've accepted that even though he's lying, at least he's not pretending to be somebody else. You're getting exactly what you voted for. And that to me seems like an important piece of this puzzle when you're starting to think about like how you defeat a Donald Trump. And, to me that is something that I think we should all kind of really think about as you think about talking to Trump supporters, because I think it can be so easy to dismiss a Trump supporter as somebody who is careless and doesn't think about anybody but themselves and actually wants to live in a racist country. I don't think that, I know a lot of Trump voters actually that don't feel that way. I know, frankly, I know a couple of Trump voters too that do feel that way, that do wish we lived in a more racist society, but not all of them feel that way. I mean, we had something like 40 some million people vote for Trump, and probably a ton of those were anti-votes. A ton of them were probably votes for, voting for a more racist America, but a bunch of them were probably also in this category of just like hating all politicians and, willing to vote for somebody else. And, I think, if you're in that camp that you're a fervent Trump hater, engaging in a conversation with somebody about this and not treating them necessarily like they're some just piece of garbage, until they prove themselves to be, I guess, that thought might help the conversation go a little bit more smoothly. Not that you're necessarily going to be able to convince them otherwise, because kind of the sub point on all of these points, right, between the being rich, hating politicians, or just owning the libtards, like there's a very interesting thing that happens anytime you hold any sort of worldview or point of view, is that when you see evidence that proves that you're wrong, very few people, and this is myself included, and I try so hard to prevent myself from this kind of confirmation bias, but when you see evidence to prove that you're wrong, it's so hard to change your mind, because people often will, humans will almost always dismiss evidence that prove them to be wrong, and will almost always accept any evidence to prove them right, even if there's not any truthfulness behind it. And there's like a psychological thing that's happening there, that if you're out there presenting to the world that you feel one way, you see this evidence that proves that you were wrong, you've got to hold on. You think that your ideas are your identity. And that cognitive dissonance, and I feel just dumb. That's like the fourth or fifth time that I've probably used a word that's a little bit, that, there's not a ton of people, digging ditches, using the word cognitive dissonance. But so I feel guilt, like I even talking about it feels, in those terms, feels so pretentious. And can we agree that using the word pretentious is pretentious by itself? But that cognitive dissonance, though, is this like notion that you're holding two beliefs at the same time, because a lot of times people can accept that reality of that evidence that proves them to be wrong, but they refuse to update the identity in this like worldview of who they are, right? And I probably should have pulled up some evidence to kind of show this in action, and maybe we'll try to do that maybe later this week. But when you hold those two opposite beliefs, there's like this weird discomfort feeling. That's cognitive dissonance. The cognitive dissonance is that feeling of like, oh God, I don't even know, like, why am I so uncomfortable? And oftentimes that can manifest in anger. It can manifest in snapping back at somebody. And that's what you'll see often, I think, with, really radical left social justice warrior types, or, the Trump supporter. They'll be shown an enormous amount of evidence to prove that however they're feeling is wrong. And they'll snap back not with, oh, but did you know X, Y, and Z? They'll snap back with like, well, you're just an idiot who believes anything that you read on CNN. And like, they don't know whether or not you read CNN. I see that one all the time. Like, I get accused of reading CNN all the time. And I'm sure I've been to CNN's website, but I have not had the CNN cable news TVs. I haven't had cable in 5 years, 6 years. And before that, I'm sure it was 5 years before I ever watched CNN. Actually, no, that is true. The election results in 2016 I watched on normal network television, but yeah, yeah, these three things, like knowing that if you're going to present evidence to somebody contrary to their worldview, will almost never persuade them to change their mind. You can chip away at trying to change their worldview, and I personally know that I've changed at least one person's mind on that. But I think it took 2 years to do it, and it does take time. And I referenced this a couple times already. On the show, but there's a great podcast by the New York Times called The Rabbit Hole. And it's really about how a bunch of people have become radicalized by QAnon and QAnon type content. And if you don't know what that is, it's really just this crazy YouTube channel, or it was a YouTube channel, but it's being like banned all over the place. But Q and QAnon, or however you want to describe it, is like the central figure in conspiracy theory stuff that's tends to be a little bit more on the conservative side, and certainly very anti-establishment. And I've been seeing a little bit of this lately, and I'd be very curious, lunatics, what your thoughts are on this. So maybe I'll throw a poll up in a second. But effectively, what you see from this QAnon content is like the Pizzagate stuff, and I don't even want to describe it because it's so insane. Or extending the Jeffrey Epstein stuff into the Clintons, and like well beyond, and like tying it in with like Bill Gates and like vaccines, and like just throwing a bunch of loosely circumstantially related items together, and then saying, how can this all be happening all at once? There's clearly some sort of bizarre conspiracy. And with that, the Rabbit Hole podcast from the New York Times really talks about how this was an accident from Google that this has become so popular. And by Google, I mean YouTube. And watching people talk about having like kind of liberalish views and then becoming radicalized to all of these conspiracy theories through weird algorithms in YouTube, and then slowly realizing how wrong they were and how long it took them to like de-radicalize. It's a fascinating podcast that I recommend everybody tune into and listen. And as you listen to it, think about like that. While supporting Trump doesn't necessarily mean that you accidentally got radicalized by some algorithm created by PhDs who work for Google, it might mean something much bigger. But, there are reasons to like Trump. I know people don't want to hear that, but there are reasons that you may be politically motivated to agree with things just based on some principles, and you're accepting all of the other crap that kind of comes along with it. But I think everybody agrees that there is a lot of bad that comes with Trump. And the people who don't agree with that just don't have their facts straight, and trying to get them to come to realize that is not as simple as just throwing the evidence in front of their face and saying, see how wrong you are. It doesn't snap people back into reality. Right? This isn't Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where Short Round just like puts a flame in Indy's stomach, and then he's suddenly no longer zombified, or whatever weird thing happened to Indiana Jones in that scene. Really, it takes time, effort, and understanding, and like a commitment to having like an open understanding, to trying to kind of convince people of that. So Anyway, this has got me kind of thinking about putting together some sort of like, you know, uh, a guide to, liking Trump and how to programmatically deconstruct that liking in a way that you can kind of talk to your Trump liking friends and not just treat them like jerks. Um, I feel like I say this every other day on Facebook, but like responding with hate in these things is always going to cause more hate. Hate begets more hate. It always has. It always will. There's no amount of calling somebody names that's going to get them to change their mind. And in fact, all you might do is fall into this third category of like conservatives who just vote for Trump to own the libs. You might fall right into the trap. So really give it a little bit more consideration before you just like attack a Trump supporter as if they're a piece of crap, because it's in some ways reacting that way and spewing that hate is only going to cause more hate. And by that, I mean that that person's only going to respond with an equal or greater amount of hate, or some third party in that's observing this conversation might come in and tell you how wrong you are and also amplify the hate. And then the cycle just perpetuates. Um, it's a shitty reality because it's so easy to just like fall victim. I'm not saying I'm above it, by the way. I as my co-host Mike Loaf has pointed out, I think casually on the show, but certainly privately, he just thinks I'm trolling online because every once in a while I'll lose my cool and I'll say something that I regret and I think is dumb and doesn't do any good at all. But I think that uh, you know that every time you're engaging with somebody that you feel is like hateful and loves Trump to, try to get richer, or just because they hate politicians or because they want to own the liberals, you need to deeply consider what it means to attack that person with any sort of ad hominem attack. And that if they're going to respond with that, you're not, nothing good is coming out of that. But there are ways, and that's probably a show for another day, where you can speak to this person and don't even necessarily have to be perfectly respectful, but you can speak to them in a way that if there's some undecided third party reading your conversation, if you are the calmer person, often that third party who's undecided is going to take your argument a little bit more seriously. Is going to probably absorb your ideas a little bit more friendly. So I've got way more to say about that for sure. But if you can kind of take that mindset into those conversations, it's going to go a lot further to hopefully not just promoting whatever political ideals you want to, spread all over the internet, but also, every hateful comment that ends up on the internet is just like one more bad thing to add to the universe that you can skip. And I'm not trying to say that like, you don't have to necessarily, take on this like this belief like, oh, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I think that's a little extremist. But, if your only resort is to be deliberately mean and uh and spiteful and angry, all you're doing is perpetuating a cycle of more hate and more meanness when there's actually opportunity to potentially change somebody's mind. And it's not the person you're arguing with. It's there are people reading those comments, especially if they're in, the comment section of a Facebook post or, Reddit or a YouTube video. There are people reading those comments. It might not feel like it, but if you're the calmer person, it's far more likely that somebody's going to take your comments seriously. So, like I said, I've got probably a couple hours worth of content that I could talk about on that note, but I'll just urge you to kind of take that philosophy into your next conversation online and recognize that it's not just the person that you're talking to that you're potentially arguing with, but there might be some quiet person following along that is undecided, that, you know, if you don't just spend 95% of your energy insulting the other person, you might actually reach out. You might be able to reach this other person. Yeah, and loyal lunatic Gigi Dobozinski asks, or offers up some really good advice that says, it also helps to ask yourself, would I say this in person? I think that's helpful. I think that is really helpful. Yeah. We don't need to rehash the full, 25-year debate about the confidence that anonymity provides to people on the internet. But all right, I'm going to leave it at that because I said the show would be about 15 minutes and we're at approaching 40. So again, your comments and your likes and your shares, your watch parties are going a long way. So if I could ask you to hit the like, the share, the react, any sort of comments, they help a ton. Head over to YouTube. If you're a YouTuber, subscribe over there. And if you hit the little bell, it'll notify you every time we're live or we publish a new video. This week, I am so excited. Like I said, we've been trying to make this happen for months. But we're going to be at Mall of America talking to their vice president of communications and just about the whole process of them reopening Wednesday, 4 p.m. Central. Get your questions in if you want us to share some of those questions. But Mike and I will be live on location, wearing masks. And who knows, maybe we'll end up on a ride. It would be great to see some sort of adventure. I'm sure Mall of America doesn't want us to ride any of the rides at Nickelodeon Universe while live, but who knows? Maybe we'll see that too. So thanks everybody for tuning into today's hotlou Happy Hour. I am your host, hotlou, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.